Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and I am here with baby Betty, and we are making a mini Dresden plate block. So this little mini Dresden plate is lots of fun to put together. It is a 16 pointy petal plate, and it comes in right at 6 inches in diameter. So that's going to give us a lot of background space in this block to play with a beautiful quilting design. So for this block, you're going to need some 2.5 inch strips. So I cut in my teal fabric a 2.5 inch strip out of a fat quarter, so it's 2.5 inches by 21. Betty, everybody won't be able to hear. They gotta be able to hear how much fabric to cut. All right, so 2.5 inches by 21, and I cut out 8 petals, and I used this Dresden Plate template number 5, and I cut these out so that the narrow end was lined up with that strip. So that way I create that small tumbler shape, that small petal shape. So I cut 8 of them out of this teal fabric, and I cut another 8 out of this pink. Now this is an actual Dresden plate because it's got a center circle, and we have a new circle. Betty's got this new thing where she just roars. So, Betty, are you having fun telling everybody how to make it? Well, we have this new circle template set, and Betty's really excited about it, obviously, and that's going to help us cut and turn our circle shapes. So for this one, I am using a 2-inch circle. That is about the smallest circle that you can put on these, simply because the tips, they don't get very far down further than that. So that's going to be the smallest circle that you can put on these plates, and I think that's really going to look really nice. And so I have cut out a piece of purple fabric a little bit bigger than that, about 3-inch square, we'll say. All right, Betty, I think you're fired from making videos with me. I think that you're going to need a nap, and everybody else is going to stick around to learn how to piece it with me, okay? So just to reiterate that, because Betty was being a little loud, I cut 2.5 inch strips from both of my fabrics that I want to be for my petals, and then I used Dresden Plate template number 5, and I lined it up so that the narrow end of the template was lined up to cut my shapes. So I cut this way, then I cut this way, and I cut out a total of 8 petals from each fabric. So now let's take our petals. This is what it's going to look like. I'm going to fold that in half. We're going to make pointy petals. So I fold that in half, right sides together, and I take that wide edge to my sewing machine and I stitch along this edge. And I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch from the end, back stitching at the beginning and end of that line. So here's what it looks like once I get that stitched. And I like to trim this at the fold, so I just take my scissors just like this, and I trim that nice and close to the stitching at the fold. That just helps to be able to turn it right side out and have a nice pointy point. All right, so now I'm going to finger press that seam allowance open and flat, and then turn the pointy petal right side out. Just like so. Grab my scissors, poke at it a little bit, and I will get that nice point to that petal shape. Now I take the whole thing and fold it in half, and this just helps me find a center point. That's the only purpose of it. And I'm going to grab my hot dry iron, give that a press, and I have changed irons, guys. This is a little bit much more heavy duty iron. My little craft iron was kind of being a little weird and not quite hot enough for the job, so I have found that this one is working a lot better. And this is just a Black & Decker Classic is what it's called. It's very heavy and it does not have any water. You can see it has no holes on the bottom, and I am loving it because those holes can sometimes catch delicate shapes like our appliques, and they can really catch and cause some problems. And I don't ever really use water in my iron unless I'm doing something very, very particular, and not this. So I don't really need have water in my iron today. So now with our petals prepped up, it's time to piece them together. I'm going to piece these together in sets of 4. So that creates 1/4 of the Dresden plate. And you can mix up how the colors to come together however you want. This is a 16 petal Dresden, so you could do 4 of the same color. In this case I did two of the same color next to each other, or you can do this arrangement I've done a lot in this quilt so far, and that is, A, B, A, B. So it's entirely up to you, but I hope you can see there's lots of different possibilities here, and they are all awesome. Now once you get your quarters pieced, you're going to piece those together in sets of 2, and then piece the 2 halves together to create your finished mini Dresden plate. So we've got one more step to do, and that is to place a circle on top right in the center. So now it's time to create our center circle, and for this I'm going to create another turning template. This is just regular freezer paper I get at the grocery store, and I have cut 2 small squares of it. I am pressing those down to my firm pressing board to double them, and that is waxy side down so that they stick to one another. And this creates a nice, really firm template, something that you can actually use so you can turn against. If you have the super thick, heavy-duty freezer paper, then you'll probably only need 1 sheet of that, 1 thickness. But whenever I'm using just regular grocery store freezer paper, I always double it like that. All right, so I'm going to take our 2-inch circle template, and this is a new circle template set that you can find at leahday.com/circle. And I just marked that 2-inch circle onto that freezer paper, and now I'm going to carefully cut that out with scissors. Now I have tried every number of circle cutters out there, and trust me guys, I've tried them all. I played with them, I fought with them, I've really tried to make them work for me, and none of them ever have. I just always find that as I'm using a circle cutter, as I come back around, it doesn't match up nicely. I end up with a blip, and sometimes that blip can be as far off as 1/8 of an inch. So the more I've tested and played with it, the more I find that just cutting out with a pair of scissors is the best way to go. So I just mark it, and then I cut very carefully on that marked line, trying to make sure that that cut is nice and smooth, and I'm not creating kind of a jagged or wobbly edge, because we're going to turn against that edge, and so any of those wobbles and bobbles and blips will be in our finished applique. Okay, so now I have my fabric, my little fabric purple square. I'm going to place my freezer paper template in the center and give it a nice press. This is why we go waxy side down, so that way the wax is going to heat up as I hit it with my hot iron, and so now it is adhered to the fabric, but very temporarily. If I really pull on it, it'll come out, but it will hold and it'll stay in place while we turn the fabric around it. Okay, so now I'm going to take my scissors again, and I'm just going to roughly cut a circle shape out of the fabric, and I am leaving a generous 1/2 inch extra fabric all the way around. I think a major mistake that beginners make with applique is cutting their pieces way too tight. And then that just makes everything difficult. If you don't have very much fabric to hang on to, you don't have very much control over what that fabric is going to be doing. We want more fabric than we think we need in order to turn. Make a nice smooth turn especially. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my stuff to do turned edges, which is a little cap with some spray starch. This is my favorite brand of spray starch, Niagara brand, but it's anything that you can find at your local grocery store. Totally doesn't matter. I just like it because it has a spray nozzle and because I can see how much liquid's in the bottle. That's it. That's the only reason I like it, quite honestly. I'm going to grab a paintbrush in order to control where the starch goes, and a pair of tweezers, and this is so I don't burn my fingertips off. Alrighty, so I just grab a little bit of starch on the tip of the paintbrush. I'm going to paint that right along the edge. Try not to get the template wet if I can avoid it. Just getting the fabric wet. And now I'm going to pull that fabric over with the tweezers and then hit it with my hot dry iron. So I'm just pulling with the tweezers and then pressing with the tip of the iron, just like so. You can see that this is just slow and steady wins the race. And so once I get kind of that whole area nice and dry, then I'll take my iron and kind of smoosh it over like that. There we go. That looks good. Now wash and repeat. Shift it over a little bit. Paint on more starch. And you can do that. You don't necessarily have to have the tweezers, like that's optional, but I find when I don't, like if I get my fingers in here, I'm getting that iron really close to my fingers, and yeah, you know, it's inevitable that I'm going to get the tips, you know, the tips of my fingers burned, and it's just no fun. So just don't feel like you can't do this because you don't have nice tweezers or whatever. You can do it with your fingers, just understand that you might get a little hot, might get a little singed. There we go. All right, paint on a little bit more. And the reason why I only work a little bit at a time, let's say about an inch at a time, is because as the liquid stays in the fabric, you know, it can definitely hit the template and start to soften the edge of the template. The longer that the fabric and the template are wet, you know, that template is still paper, and it will start to get soft and loosey-goosey along that edge, and then you won't have a nice edge to turn against. Pretty much I can make one turning template and then use it for a long time. I can turn lots and lots of circles with it. So this is not something where, you know, I need to make this new every single time. I could probably turn 50 circles with this, so long as I don't get that edge wet and it start to break down. So just keep that in mind. Definitely going to be something that you can use for lots and lots of circles if you go nice and slow and just, you know, a little bit of starch at a time. There we go. That looks good. Once I get it all over, then I just kind of take my iron and smoosh and go half. And that just gets, you know, all that, it's like it's the fabric's pleating up. I just want it all to pleat up and then lay flat. I'll do the same thing on this edge. That looks good. And it's nice and toasty. You have to kind of pick it up. It's a hot potato. All right, now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to trim that excess fabric. We don't need all of that behind that circle. That's just a little bit bulky. So now I'm going to trim that down so that the extra fabric is trimmed so that the folded edge is only about a half of an inch. Sorry, quarter of an inch. About a quarter of an inch of fabric folding over. There we go, and that doesn't have to be perfect, just like that. All right, now I'm going to pull that out, take out my freezer paper template. I can use that on something else. Pull that, you know, kind of get it back into shape. Sometimes it'll go really weird looking, and then you have to push it back into shape, flatten it back out. This is why I use a firm pressing board, is it just helps me get the fabric back under control. Press it down, give it a nice press, and now it's ready to go on my block. So here we go. I've already gotten my little mini plate centered up. It just looks so cute. I'm so happy with how this turned out. And you can see I just have crease lines that have allowed me to line this up nicely. And then I can just fold this turned circle in half, create a little crease line to the top and bottom, do the same thing in the opposite direction. And this is, you know, if you really want it to be nicely centered, which I like it to be nicely centered. There we go. So I've got crease lines in both directions. Just line that up. And now I'm going to grab my micro tip glue bottle. So this is just a bottle that I have filled with Elmer's glue. You can find these also on my website, leahday.com. And that just dispenses the exact right amount of glue along this folded edge. I've already glued down my plate, so I just want to glue the circle down now on top. And Elmer's glue is basically a thicker form of liquid starch, and it will wash out completely the first time you wash your quilt. So it's nothing to worry about using on your fabric. Once I get about a quarter of the circle secured, then I put a little bit more glue around and get that in place. And what I like about using a hot dry iron is that as soon as you hit it with the hot dry iron, that glue will dry. You don't have to sit around waiting for it to get dry. And then a little bit more along this edge. And if you want to, you can grab those tweezers again to help you hang on to it. All right, that looks good. So that is it for piecing our mini Dresden plate. This is Dresden number 4. We are making lots of different Dresden plates and rings this year using the templates from the Dresden template set. So if you'd like to join in the fun, come and check out all of the different Dresden rings and plates we've made so far this year. You can check it out at leahday.com/Dresden. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot and enjoyed creating this mini Dresden plate with me and Betty today. I know she was a little chatty at the beginning, but I think that we're both ready to go make some more Dresden plates. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until next time, let's go quilt!